Hi, everybody. This is Robin Pugh with Intelligence for Good, and I am excited to introduce to you today Jeff Jafrida, who is our newest team member, who will be Director of Investigations with us. And Jeff has a great background and a great personal story that has led to his passion around the work that we're doing here at Intelligence for Good. So I wanted you to have the chance to hear it directly from him today. Jeff, tell us a little bit about what's brought you here.
All right, thank you for that intro, Robin. So, hey everybody, my name is Jeff, and I do have a personal connection to the work that Intelligence for Good does. I actually have a story that relates back to my grandparents who fell for a grandparent scam about 10 years ago. I was lucky to grow up having actively involved grandparents on both sides of my family that lived close by, particularly my maternal grandma who lived just a bike ride away, and she sort of sat at the head of my mom's family. We had a wonderful relationship. I was her first grandson, and she used to take care of me every weekday before I was school age. She was English as a second language. She immigrated to America from the Abruzzo region of Italy after losing a sibling to a bombing, actually. So she learned English via soap operas, and she had a very specific viewpoint as far as family goes and safety goes between her personal experiences there and then also our relationship. And so my safety, it mattered a lot to her. And even when I moved away to California, we spoke every Friday at the same time. So I think we both really looked forward to those calls, and she loved the check-ins, and I guess that sort of creates a perfect scam storm for a senior in that she was primed to sort of expect calls from me, and she was concerned about my well-being to begin with. I was thousands of miles away. So when a bad actor called her in 2013 to use a grandparent scam against her, they were temporarily successful. So at the time I just finished actually my 1L year at Northeastern in Boston, Massachusetts, and I was completing what they call a co-op. It's essentially an internship with the state securities regulator there. And I received a really concerning voicemail from my grandma during my lunch break. It's one that I still have on my current phone. I've shared it with my teammates at my current employer, and it's something that I actually regularly listen to as a grounding mechanism and to remind myself sort of why I got into this 10 years ago. And the gist of the voicemail is, hey, I'm worried about you. I need you to call me back as soon as possible. And so I did, and I stepped out and I gave her a call back, and she was shocked to learn that I had been in Boston the entire week. She was pretty worked up, so I spent some time calming her down and gently nudging her for details of what had occurred over the past few days. And she essentially gave me these facts. Someone had called her house phone and addressed her as grandma and asked if she knew who was calling. She was generally expecting calls from me at that time of the week, so she supplied my name. They then assumed my identity and presented her with what I would call an unbelievable tale of international debauchery that they described as only being able to be undone if she sent a significant amount of funds to a specific location that they had identified for her. And they obviously instructed her, hey, don't tell my parents, don't call my cell phone, don't tell grandpa. Um, this is between me and you. Now, it still pulls on my heartstrings to think about her in that moment. But she did it. She went to her local bank branch. She pulled out a significant portion of her bank account, and she mailed that in a shoebox to using USPS to a location in Brooklyn. I am from Connecticut, so that is where the East Coast operations of this threat group were. Um, she sent it, I want to say, on a Wednesday, and she checked in with me later on a Thursday. So the package was still en route when we spoke. I was very upset at that news, and so I went back into my internship and I explained to the lawyers who I was working for what had happened. They thankfully had some great connections in law enforcement and local police departments sort of across the Northeast. And so they were able to get me in touch with different members of law enforcement to go to the address that my grandma had sent the funds to. It was a really, honestly, just a stroke of luck that they had her send physical funds in the mail via snail mail. I mean, remember this is 2013, so it's a little more involved those days. Wasn't as instant in nature, the scamming, but that actually was very beneficial for us because the local police were able to sort of stake out the apartment and flag down the landlord who let them in and sort of explained to them that he had suspected something was up given all the packages that were coming in and the lack of the presence of the tenant who was coming by irregularly and then removing all the packages.
Wow.
So he cooperated. Yeah, it was, it's interesting that the landlord noticed that sort of thing and really didn't do much about it. I've
Mm.
always wondered about that.
Yeah.
Um, but either way, the police found a living room full of packages from similar seniors who had fallen victim to some version of that grandparent scam. And they were able, thankfully, to identify my grandma's by the return address. And I think it was three other groups of grandparents whose packages were still easily identifiable and recent and they're in the living room. And the figure is escaping me a decade later, but it was, I think, just shy of about 100 grand that they discovered related to this group that was going in and out of that apartment at the time. They tracked it back to an international operation. I guess the funds were eventually going to be moved to Canada and then outside of North America from there. So I was not able to participate in the follow-up investigation, but that day I sort of saw the power of the regulators and after law school, I went to work at FINRA. I saw the power of, security researchers and law enforcement, which developed a passion for threat intelligence. And I have been squashing scammers and fraudsters ever since. And like I said, it's something that I have to remind myself of regularly. To ground myself and to help sort of process the amount of victims that I see on a daily or weekly or monthly basis, just so I can remember these are humans and they're in a really tough spot.
Yeah. I think there's so many interesting points about your story, but to me, this is just what, 10 years ago. And when you think about how payments have evolved in the past 10 years, I mean, thank goodness instant payments were not a big deal in 2013, or else you may not have a good ending to this story. But I also love the visual that it creates in my mind, thinking about this apartment that has all these packages from all these scam victims. This is exactly why Intelligence for Good is here, because it wasn't just one criminal preying on one victim. It was a criminal who's part of a network preying on multiple victims and represented by all those packages sitting around that living room. That is, in essence, what we're doing. We're collecting data points. You know, those are the individual packages that are sitting around the living room that we're looking at, right? So, whereas you knew of your grandma who was one victim, there were many others like her. And we need to use our resources as intelligence professionals to identify all those other grandmas, all those other grandpas, all those other packages. Where are they sending funds to? Who's part of that ring? It's all about not giving law enforcement more dots, but connecting more dots for them so that they can effectively prosecute, identify, disrupt these really organized and sophisticated scammers. And believe me, they have continued to evolve rapidly over the past 10 years. But what a remarkable story, and I love how that you have allowed it to kind of inform your career path and your work with us. And I think there's just a lot of good, valuable lessons learned there. And I know so many of our supporters have stories that have similar threads to them, and we all have a personal reason why we're here today. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, happy to. There's a lot of takeaways, like you said. And one thing I would like to correct, I guess, I think I called her a victim at one point in there. That is a term that, it's very charged, Robin. And I
Yeah,
think a lot of the times we use it in a way to sort of absolve people of any guilt that they have for interacting with these individuals whose entire job is to trick you.
yeah,
And so I think it's a very like well-natured, I know my usage there was, um,
I said it also.
the intention's good. But I think in her case, and I think in a lot of victims, especially in her group of senior and vulnerable investors, it in some ways it takes away power from them, and it makes them, it further exacerbates their feeling of like I am able to be manipulated, like,
Right.
I don't have
Great
any say.
point.
And what I really love about Intelligence for Good is, like, we're saying, "No, you do have say." And, like, where one individual can only see one package and one phone call, like,
Right.
when we have the ability to see more of that, it's it's remarkable what we can do to connect those dots and to get those cases prepped and to give those people their power back, you know?
Yes. Yeah, I love it. Great, great message there. Well, is there anything else you would want to share as we wrap this up?
No, just if anyone out there who has, fallen for one of these scams before or been contacted and, avoided it in some way, um, I just want you to know you're not alone.
Yeah, absolutely. The uh the psychology, the manipulation, the tactics, they really are well developed and sophisticated.
They are.
And these individuals spend a long time honing their skills on how to manipulate us into getting the response that they want. So maybe a better term for those who have been impacted is you've been a target. You've been a target of these
I love
individuals.
that. I love that. You have been
That's
a target.
our new word for the day.
There we go, and it's one we already use anyways. So,
Yes.
if you've been targeted by any of these losers who are out there scamming and taking advantage of people, you know, come our way. We're here to help,
Right.
and, the more data we get and the more examples we get, the more likely other people are to benefit from your sharing as well.
Exactly. Awesome. Well, thank you again, Jeff. We're super excited to see all the results of your expertise coming on board at Intelligence for Good, and we'll have a lot more to report out.
I can't wait to get going, Robin.